I'm trying to understand where you are trying your end game in Ukraine. You are not going there. You are not sending troops there. There will be no flight zone over Ukraine. And will it be a fair assessment to say that you are pushing these guys to commit suicide, knowing that Russia has a superpower and eventually it will capture the main cities, Kiev and Kharkiv and all the cities around there? What's the end game?
Well, the end game is really a question for President Putin. We have completely crushed his economy. We have provided military assistance, humanitarian assistance to the Ukrainians, enabling them to fight back for far longer than the Russian leadership anticipated. And again, he has to determine what the path forward looks like for him. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Joining me now, a frequent guest on the show, obviously, Dave Reaboi, my friend. I highly recommend you sign up for his Substack called Late Republic Nonsense. He's also a senior fellow at Claremont Institute. Dave, what am I supposed to make of that whole exchange right there?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, and I remarked on Twitter when I saw it, that it was the first legitimate question that the White House has gotten on the subject of Ukraine and Russia, maybe for the last decade, which is, okay, what's the end game here? Where are we going with this? And where, what does an accommodation with the Russian state and Vladimir Putin look like? And to this point, nobody, I mean, very pointedly, Jen Psaki did not answer. She just said, the ball is in Putin's court. Well, of course, that's not an answer. The correct answer should be, what is it that we can get from the Russians where they are satisfied and we are satisfied, and we can sort of reset to zero and frankly take on China, because our posture with regard to the Russians is to keep sending them into the arms of China, is to keep creating a situation where more of the world's powers like India and Saudi Arabia abandon the United States and sort of say this is too much trouble. What is the end game in Russia? What do they want? And the answer for most of Beltway Washington, really for the last decade, is we want to get rid of Putin. And they think exactly 0 steps after that. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the Iraq War, where it's like, okay, we're going to get rid of Saddam. All right, then what? And as we saw from the Iraq War, it seems like there was nobody at the State Department or the Pentagon or the White House that said, okay, what do we do once we win the war?
Dave, okay, how's the normal American, how are they supposed to unpack this? Because I have no problem with anything you just said. It is a dangerous situation. I can see it happening right in front of my eyes. The Saudis are going to line up with the Russians and line up with China, and we're going to have this huge new group that we're going to be cut out of in the world. They're going to get rid of the dollar and everything else, and that's not good. But the normal American also, in his DNA, doesn't like Russia and doesn't like Vladimir Putin, and they don't like the fact that he's invading Ukraine. How do we merge those two worlds?
Sure. I mean, look, that's the question of statecraft, which is obviously we don't like Putin and Russia in Ukraine. They need to leave. The hostilities need to end. The question then is, what will it take for that to happen? Can Ukraine and Russia reach a reasonable accommodation? Frankly, based on, and that I'm going to get accused of being pro-Russia here, but I think it's nonsense. I'll say that the things that Russia has been demanding of Ukraine, namely, staying neutral, staying out of NATO, and allowing the Russians to keep the breakaway Donbass regions, or allowing them to be independent, and allowing the Russians to keep Crimea. I mean, all those things are I think they're reasonable if your goal is to have a functioning Ukrainian state full of Ukrainians, a sovereign state. Now, if your goal is in fact to have a Ukrainian state that joins NATO in the West, of course that these things are non-starters. So at the end of the day, Ukraine has to choose whether it wants NATO or whether it wants to kind of exist as a sovereign country. Now, we just saw yesterday that, or today, that Zelensky said, you know what, we're not going to choose NATO, which is one thing that brings him a step closer to reaching some kind of accommodation with Putin, with Russia. And I mean, this whole time, I think Putin's asks have been calibrated to be things that Ukraine could agree to on one hand, but the U.S. and NATO would find very problematic. So in that respect, we almost had, the U.S. and Western Europe sort of pushing Ukraine into this situation, where I think personally, I think this war could have absolutely been avoided. But now that it's done, and we're seeing, the horrific images and terrible. I mean, look, all war is terrible, and we want it to end now, which means we want to figure out a way to de-escalate the situation. We want to figure out a way to sort of reintegrate Russia in order to halt some of these effects that you were just saying. The petrodollar, disappearing, being replaced by Chinese currency. Again, the alliance of India and China with Russia. I mean, all of these things are kind of problems for the United States that are far greater in magnitude to what's happening in Ukraine.
Hey, thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and like and subscribe. You heard me. Like it, subscribe. You'll get a lot more of it and a lot more of me.